Good morning. It's a great honor to be here among the hardworking men and women of the IAFF who fight to protect our public safety in our communities and our city of Orlando every day. I want to thank the General President, my friend Harold Shapeberger, for that kind introduction. I also want to thank him for inviting me to address this group. I probably would have chosen a different place in the program, having just watched that fiery, great opening to this conference. But he is exactly right on every point he made in terms of this union and every union around the country being under fire. You know, it's an interesting time in our country and in our communities as we examine the relationships between public employees, public safety unions, and governments at all levels, from the federal level to the state level to the local level. And every time you turn on the TV, there's a crisis in some state or some city, and allegedly over pensions and public safety benefits or funding. And by the time you've reached that point, it's virtually impossible to compromise and work together. So in this climate, I want to tell you a little bit of a different story about how we work together with our local fire union and with the international to save and secure 46 firefighter jobs. It's about a mayor and a city government and the international and the local putting politics aside, putting some past differences aside, putting the inflammatory rhetoric aside, and making sure that we kept 46 firefighters on the job, we protected taxpayers, and we kept the highest level of fire protection anywhere in the country at that level in the city of Orlando. And let's step back to 2007, 2008. In Orlando and most of the country, we're enjoying a pretty high ride in terms of housing prices going up in the country. They'd increased by about 55%. City of Orlando, 107% over 5 years. We invested heavily in public safety, both police and fire. And in 2007, 2008, those same housing prices plummeted. We had less revenue than we had the year before, and it was going to stay that same way for many years. And it wasn't just 1 year. We knew that we had 3 or 4 years where we would have less revenue than we had the year before. So we did what other families were doing in the city of Orlando. We looked at our budget and looked at where we could trim expenses, and we looked at what were our core functions, and certainly public safety was job number one. But we cut over 400 positions, and to give you a magnitude, we have about 3,200 employees. We have certainly less today. We had reductions in services, we had salary freezes, job furloughs, we even canceled Christmas. Not quite really, but we did cut out about half the decorations that we generally put up in the city. And if there was something to cut, we cut it. And through 2009, we were able to hold police and fire harmless. We didn't cut a single sworn position in either police or fire. And as I mentioned, the couple of years before, when we were having a great increase in revenue, we invested in police and fire. The only new positions that were added in the city of Orlando were 2 police and fire. And as a result, our Orlando Fire Department was able to attain an ISO rating of 1. And for most audiences, I have to explain what that means, but I know that this crowd knows that that's a pretty big deal to have an ISO rating of 1. Unfortunately, like every other city in America, you can only cut so far before you reach reality, and the reality is that public safety is over 60% of our general fund budget. So no matter how far you go, at some point you have to start looking at police and fire. And that's where we were in 2009. We were confronted with the possibility of laying off 46 firefighters. And that was about the time that SAFER originated. And we could have gone to war with our local union, or they could have gone to war with us, but we decided to take a different course. We sat down at the bargaining table and worked together and mapped out a strategy for how can we get the SAFER grant. And we thought we were going to be the model. It took a little bit more work than we could have possibly anticipated. And for those of you who followed the SAFER process, it took a while for them to write the regulations relating to who was going to be awarded SAFER grants. And that presented a problem for us because as we were applying for the SAFER grant, our calendar year, our budget year came up, and we didn't have the funds to fund the 46 firefighters. Well, we waited to see whether we could get the SAFER grant or not. And that's when our local union, Local 1365, stepped up. Steve Clellan, where are you? Are you out there? And the guys from 1365, would you stand if you're out there? There they are, way in the back. They took me out drinking last night. That's why they're late to arrive, and they're in the back of the room. But they came up with a strategy where they said, we will agree to defer our cost of living increases and over a period of time to allow the city to fund those 46 firefighter positions out of our cost of living increases until we can get the SAFER grant. And it did allow us to delay the layoffs, and we were awarded the funding to keep the firefighters on the job. And I got to thank President Schaetberger, because without his intervening in the entire process, we would have never got there. But it was interesting because we had a interim United States Senator named George Lemieux, who's a Republican, and I don't know that he had ever met a union member before, but his staff worked with the International to persuade FEMA that the regs needed to be written or at least construed in a fashion that the 46 firefighters from Orlando would be one of the first that were awarded, and that in fact happened. So working together, the city government, Local 1365, and our partners here at the International, we got it done. And what I want to say to you is, we don't view you as the enemy. I know that there are a lot of public officials today that want to make firefighters the enemy, want to make teachers the enemy, want to make police the enemy, when just a few short years ago, was it only a decade ago that 9/11 occurred? They don't remember. They don't remember, do they? But I think we achieve much more in an atmosphere when we can work together and sit across a bargaining table. Yes, a bargaining table, and bargain. And one of the results of being able to do that, you can also see in the city of Orlando. We have worked on pensions to make sure that our firefighters have good salaries and have good benefits. And yes, our pensions are fully funded. And yes, our firefighters contribute to those pensions. And that's because we've been able to bargain over the years and do what's right for both the firefighters and the taxpayers of the city of Orlando. I want to close just by saying that there are elected officials in America, in the states and the cities, that understand that every day you go out on the job could be your last day on the job, and what you do to protect our communities. And most of us, the vast majority of us, appreciate your service and will be right there with you to protect collective bargaining. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.